This video offers a short overview of Formulate and how to use it to build key performance indicators, or KPIs, for your reports and dashboards. KPIs are generally used to drive gauges and scorecard visualizations. They offer a summarized graphic to tell users where they are, where they need to be, and how well they're doing on achieving those goals. The Formulate app in Pyramid is for pro users to author and build a variety of advanced logical items that are then used elsewhere. This includes calculations, lists or sets, KPIs, parameters, custom visuals, and Python and R scripts. The logic built in Formulate is usually shareable and stored like all other items in Pyramid in the content management system. This means that they can be versioned, secured, copied, and managed as first-class independent items, much like a report or a dashboard. In this video, we'll focus on the KPI Designer, which offers both a graphical and scripting interface for building key performance indicators using the Prequel or MDX languages. Other videos will focus on the other Formulate tools, including Formula, which offers a mechanism to build calculations and formulas, Lists, which offers a mechanism to build dynamic and logical ways of selecting elements from hierarchies, and Parameters, which allow designers to build more complex flows into reports, dashboards, and any other calculation. Before we use the KPI Designer, let's better understand the anatomy of a KPI. A KPI typically involves comparing a current value from your data source, called the actual value, against a second value that's called the target value. To make it easier to compare the two, a formula is constructed to show how well your actual results are performing against the target. This is called the status value. To further enhance the understanding of the status value, the KPI also uses bands so a user can easily determine how good or bad the status outcome is. If the KPI is constructed with dynamic logic bands, it can reflect changing levels of success or failure. The quick KPI wizard in Discover can build and deliver a KPI in a single click. However, the full KPI Designer in Formulate allows you to build these elements quickly and easily with greater control and depth. To start a new KPI, open the Formulate module from the home page or from the App tab menu. Select KPI and then select a data model that the KPI will operate against. The KPI workspace contains several main items. At the top we have the ribbon menu where you can access scripting mode, internal parameters, and jump buttons for adding more Formulate items. The large button in the top left corner is used to run and test your KPI. And the results are shown over here in the preview panel on the right. Below the preview panel we have properties, which allow us to configure details for our KPI. On the left we have a list of the KPI's key elements. Use this to set each one in turn, and as you click the element, different choices and submenus are shown. The actual, target, and status elements all share the same interface and allow you to create formulas and calculations. So for each one, there's a submenu of all the relevant functions that we can use in each formula, broken out into convenient categories. There are two sets of functions depending on your data source. For SQL data sources, the function library is made up of Prequel functions, while for MDX data sources, it's made up of MDX and VBA functions. The function list is further split into block functions for easy point-and-click access to graphical objects, and normal text functions, which are less graphical and cover the more advanced logic that may be needed. Hovering over a function will show you a rich tooltip that shows its syntax and explains what the function can be used for. Right-clicking on a function will show a context-sensitive help menu. And the central panel is the formula canvas where your functions can be built. To see the KPI Designer in action, we're going to build a quarter-on-quarter sales performance KPI among US states, where the goal is to exceed last quarter's sales by 2%. To determine good or bad performance, each state will be compared to every other state in a given quarter. So first we'll pick the dial graphic KPI. Next, using a block function, we'll define the actual value of our KPI. When we click on a block, we're presented with the entire data model schema in the fly-up dialog below. And from here, we can pick coordinates. So in this case, it's simply the sales measure. Now let's define the target value. Per our objective, the target is the sales value from last quarter plus 2%. So let's start by choosing the sales metric. And then let's pick the quarter. While it's tempting to just pick a specific quarter like this, our target value is now always set to Q2 2020. It's not a great solution if we want to change the underlying quarter that we're analyzing. So luckily, there are some smart functions to make the selection dynamic. So we'll click on the function button and choose previous member. This means that for whichever quarter that we're analyzing, the target value will refer to the previous quarter's sales value. We also said that the target is 2% more than last quarter, so we need to multiply the resolved value by 1.02. Next, we need to set the status value. By default, a formula using block functions is being pre-populated for us. If we use the templates button, we can see some other quick formula options. And of course, the formula is freeform and we can write any type of logic that we want. Flipping back to the built-in growth formula, we're going to measure the status as the change between actual and target compared to the target. The final step is to define success and failure bands. Although this is optional, almost every KPI includes banding to graphically indicate performance to users. We'll choose the classic 3-band setup. We next need to set the trim points to define where a band begins and ends. Each trim point value can be independently defined, and there are 4 techniques for setting them. In the first technique, trim points can be typed in as static numbers. While this is quick and easy, it means that they won't be able to adjust to changes in the data. In this example, all the bands are the same regardless of how sales figures may fluctuate quarter to quarter. So this might be somewhat useless if business is seasonal. The second technique is to set a trim point as a parameter. Parameters allow the end user to tweak the value of the trim point at runtime, so they can effectively change the banding on the fly. To use this option, parameters need to have been created in advance. Using our previous example, the user can change the second band using the parameterized sliders, so they can change the bands on the fly. The third technique is to set the trim point with a standalone formula. This formula is like all the others used in the KPI for actuals, targets, and status, with the full breadth and depth of the underlying function library. So it represents the most flexible framework for determining the trim point value, which can now change as the data changes in the query or database. Using our previous example again, the third band is determined using a mathematical formula, which will recalibrate itself based on changes in the data or query context. This makes it supremely useful for designing dynamic bands and smarter KPIs. The fourth and final technique is to set the trim point with an evaluation set. This powerful feature provides the opportunity to build sophisticated dynamic bands using point-and-click options without having to manually construct the formula logic as with the standalone formulas in the previous example. To use them, we need to select an evaluation set of hierarchical elements that will be the set or cohort of items we consider when generating our metrics. So here we'll choose states. Then we return to our band setup and change the trim points to percentile points. Here we simply choose the min value in our evaluation set as the minimum band, then use quartiles to set even trim points for each of the next 3 25th percentiles. And finally, we set a max for the maximum band. When this banding runs, it will take the status values for lowest, highest, 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile states in the cohort and use that to drive the bands. As these values change based on the data or query context, these 5 trim points will adjust automatically, building a more intelligent KPI that responds to the reality of the data rather than static values. So using our example, the bands for each state are consistent in a given quarter, but change quarter to quarter. Also, the values within each quarter are determined by the current success or failure of the states themselves. So a state's success is measured according to all other states dynamically for a given quarter without any artificial hard-coded standards. This completes our overview of the KPI designer in Formulate, highlighting some of its core functions and capabilities. For a deeper review of these features and the many items not included in this video, like the quick KPI wizard, check out the video tutorial section in the online help or follow our blog series on the community forum.